The best thing you do when you make a mistake is say, I made a mistake. Roger, I hope you'll forgive me for the mistake I made. I think also it's being transparent. And ultimately is, can I trust you? I can build up trust with somebody for 30 years, and if I lie to them or don't tell them the truth, that trust can go right out the window, and it'll take another 10 years to get it back.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Leadership. A wise man once advised living life by a compass, not a clock. In today's option-packed world, that counsel is more pertinent than ever. Look around you. Many people, busy though they are, seem to amble through their lives in a directionless cadence, leaving the footprints of their lives meandering down a road that's meandering itself. There's a better way to live life and do work, and Bill Geroge provides the ideal guidance. Who's Bill Geroge? He's former chairman and CEO of Medtronic, the world's leading medical technology company. Under Bill's leadership, the company's market capitalization grew from $1.1 billion to $60 billion. Earlier in his career, Bill was an executive with Honeywell and Litton Industries and served in the U.S. Department of Defense. He's been a director of Goldman Sachs, ExxonMobile, Novartis, Target, and the Mayo Clinic. Today, he's executive fellow at Harvard Business School. In addition to that street cred, Bill has written several best-selling books related to leadership. His latest is True North, Leading Authentically in Today's Workplace. Bill, welcome to Leadership.
Thank you, Roger. It's great to be back with you. I'm thrilled to do it.
Thank you so much. I've heard you say that when you were an executive at Honeywell, you felt like you had hit the wall in your career. Tell us about that experience and how it influenced your colossal success at Medtronic.
Well, I spent a decade at Honeywell. I had some great experiences, the best of which was being president of Honeywell Europe, Middle East, and Africa, based in Brussels, when my kids were young, and Penny took a leave of absence, and we had a wonderful experience. Came back, I got a two-step promotion, and I got thrown into the bureaucracy of turnarounds. I was the only one that wanted to do turnarounds. Other people didn't want to do them. So as soon as I get one turnaround done, I got 9 divisions, 3 groups. Then I moved to another one, and then eventually to a third. And I think they were trying to groom me to become CEO. I was one or two candidates to take that role, maybe the leading candidate at the time. But one day I looked at myself in the rearview mirror and realized, for all the smiles and everything, I was deeply unhappy because Honeywell had no sense of purpose other than making money, which we knew how to do, and I know how to do, but that's not how I want to live my life. So I went home and told my wife that I was feeling miserable inside, running around, spending 80% of the time traveling and not really fulfilling any deeper purpose. And at that point in time, I pulled back and I realized it wasn't so important to be with a really giant company like Honeywell, although Medtronic's grown up to be equally large. But I really wanted to find something where I could have a clear set of values and purpose. And I turned down Medtronic 3 times for a job. Same job, number 2, President, Chief Operating Officer. So I called the CEO back and says, that job's still open. I turned down 6 months ago. And he said, we're about ready to fill it, but you can get in line if you want. So I did. And I remember walking in the door and I felt like I was coming home to a place I'd never been before. And this was the right place for me. And it turned out to be the best decision in my professional life. And 13 great years there.
That's terrific. Who have been your mentors over the years, and what were some of the key learnings you received from them?
Well, I've been blessed to have a lot of wonderful mentors. I had the rector at my church that wanted me actually to become a priest at the Episcopal Church next door. I remember when I went to Harvard Business School, We had an associate dean named Leslie Rollins, and he just opened my eyes, took me from a narrow engineer to open up my aperture to see what was possible and really challenged me to step up to bigger opportunities and greater things. And he was wonderful. And then when I had my first job, I went to work for a man named Bob Bruder, who was a true entrepreneur. He dropped out of college after his freshman year, and he had founded the commercial microwave oven business. And this is a time when Litton was thinking about getting into the consumer business. In 1969, I joined him. I put the plan together to go into the consumer business, and then things didn't go well at first. And so I took over the small division that was trying to do this and build up from about 10 million to 200 million. And he was a wonderful mentor. He used to say, Bill, nothing happens until somebody sells something. And he was a true entrepreneur. And I learned a lot from him.
Those relationships were a blessing to you for sure.
They sure were.
And now you write a lot about authentic leadership. What is it in our society that seems to cause people to equate celebrity with authenticity?
Well, that's why I wrote the book, because back in the 90s, we were doing that. And Jack Welch was a celebrity, and we were looking at celebrity CEOs. Every board wanted to go outside their organization and hire a celebrity CEO. Frankly, most of these people failed because they didn't understand the culture, the business they were getting into. So I wrote Authentic Leadership to say, no, there's a better way to lead. It's not about celebrities that focus on fame, money, and power. It's really about people that have character. So instead of charisma, you need to look for people with character. And instead of, you need to look for people with integrity and that are really down-to-earth people who can empower your team. And so it was a whole different way of thinking about leadership. No one had ever written about authentic leadership back then. And I took a crack at it as someone who really was not an author at all. But it gave me a chance to put down a lot of my thoughts on the kind of leaders I thought we should have. And fortunately, it's taken off. And over the years now, with my newer books, True North, it's really become, as Harvard Business Review called it 10 years ago, the gold standard for leaders.
Yes, certainly. You emphasize that authentic leaders are characterized by truth-telling, transparency, and trust. What has occurred in the workplace and in society at large that makes these things so attractive compared to leadership qualities emphasized in the past?
Well, we're living in a big change in society. Where do you find truth? It used to be we'd listen to Walter Cronkite and he would bring us the truth. But we don't have our Edward R. Murrow when I was a boy growing up. Where do you go? What newspapers? What publications? Where do you find your leaders tell you the truth? There's a tendency today, some leaders and certainly political leaders do this. They want to spin everything to work to their benefit. And I think that's a horrible thing. We just had a situation where people were releasing battle plans for an attack on the Houthis in the Suez Canal. And no one would own it. Hey, I made lots of mistakes in my life. The best thing you do when you make a mistake is say, I made a mistake. Roger, I hope you'll forgive me for the mistake I made. But they kind of forget about that. And so I think also it's being transparent. So, and ultimately is, can I trust you? Because I can build up trust with somebody for 30 years. And if I lie to them or don't tell them the truth, that trust can go right out the window. And it'll take another 10 years to get it back. And that's happened a lot in society today.
Sure has. So what are some of the more common things that influence people to lose their way, to lose sight of their true north?
Well, I think it's getting caught up with your own ego. We've seen this in Mark Zuckerberg, who founded Facebook. He now calls it Meta, call it whatever you like. But there's no trust there because he takes your private information and sells it, and without getting your permission. So do you really want your healthcare data sold to someone, because they're going to solicit you for business? And so there's no trust, there's no truth there. So he's lost his way in trying to become a celebrity. So that's an example. I think people get caught up with trying to be celebrities. That's what he's trying to be, and it doesn't work. Even Elon Musk, who I think is the greatest inventor of our era, is spending so much time on politics now. He's losing sight of what it takes to create great companies like Tesla and SpaceX. And he did that to his credit. These are truly great companies. But to sustain them, you have to stay with them. You can't just get involved in other things.
You say the dimensions of an authentic leader include purpose, values, relationships, self-discipline, and heart. Relationships, as you would agree, certainly evolve over time, and a person's self-discipline is likely to improve with maturity. What about purpose, values, and heart? How do those dimensions evolve?
Well, this is a good question. I think your values start as a young person, but in your family. But when you go off, you really have to solidify what are your values as opposed to your family's values. And then you have to practice them. And I find many people abandoning their values, and then they really are swimming in chaos. As Jim Burke, the famous CEO of J&J, once said, without that moral compass, you can swim in chaos. Now, purpose you can be following a purpose, but it takes you a long time to clarify where that purpose will be. In my case, I didn't get to Medtronic until my mid-40s and realized my purpose, I was not an expert in medical technology. My real purpose has been all along, now that I'm teaching at Harvard, when I was at Medtronic or Honeywell, is enabling leaders to reach their full potential. And I'd like to think that I have the ability to help inspire people to come together to really step up to what they can do and make a difference in the world. So I work now almost exclusively with mentoring leaders and teaching in the classroom to help people reach their full potential. But it can take you time to really understand what your real purpose is. I think you have to have a lot of experiences. But by the time you're running a company, you need to find a, if you will, congruence between your purpose and the company's purpose. So I didn't have that at Honeywell. I knew how to make money, but as I said, that's not how I want to spend my life. But I did have it at Medtronic. And Medtronic's mission was to restore people to full life and health. And we measured ourselves by how many people were being restored every year. And that really inspired me, and inspired me to build a team of great leaders that could carry that out.
Well, if more people would more proactively explore and discover and clarify their purpose, our rates of employee engagement in companies would be a lot higher than it is today.
And if those same leaders would spend a lot more time with their frontline employees, one of the reasons they're disengaged is management's not engaged with them.
Right.
Their leaders are.
Exactly.
If you're running a retail organization, how much time are you spending on the floor talking to your frontliners? If you go on an airline, you don't see the CEO, you see the flight attendant. Maybe you see the pilot. And you realize the maintenance people, these are the people who make the place go. This is true for every business.
Sure.
It's certainly true for the doctors implanting Medtronic products. They're frontliners.
Well, and our mutual friend, Doug Conant, certainly showed the way when he got out and all over the world and visited with Campbell Soup employees at every level. And as you know, he wrote more than 30,000 handwritten thank you notes. That's engaging with the troops.
Well, no, people save those notes. Doug is a fantastic leader. And, he went through his own challenges, helped out with an automobile accident, but he came back and now, he's influencing so many leaders, and he's so generous with his time. He's a role model for me.
For many of us. Now, in the world of business and public life, who are some of today's leaders that you would regard as demonstrating authenticity? Specifically, what do you see in them that is worth emulating?
Well, one person I look to is just gotten to know is Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. Steve Ballmer had been there for 14 years before him, and the stock was lower after 14 years than when he started, and they'd missed every opportunity. Satya changed all of Microsoft to say, we think we're a bunch of know-it-alls and know everything. We actually have to be learn-it-alls. So, Roger, if you're not continuing to learn, you're probably in the wrong place. And we want you to be growing as a person. And by learning, you grow. And so we're looking for positive growth initiatives from people. We want everyone in the company to grow. And third, you need to bring empathy to this company. Now, he'd learned this from the tragic life and death of his son, Zane, who had cerebral palsy from birth. And he really learned empathy himself. And he said, you really have to have empathy for your fellow employees and your customers. And we don't have that. We have to transform this company. Now, look, he's done a lot of great things strategically, but he is a truly great leader. Another one is a former student of mine, Mary Barra, who is a CEO of General Motors.
Right.
Okay, she's facing a rough time. The president put on 25% tariffs. But let me tell you, she's the real deal. She came to my classroom. She was head of product development for General Motors. A year later, she was CEO. And yeah, they had a lot of changes they needed to make, but she made it a much more authentic place, replaced her team, brought some really good people in. And, they were denying that went back to the ignition switches. People were dying and they denied they had any problem and made it a lawsuit. And she said, no, we're going to change this. We got quality problems. We have a cultural problem. We have to change all that. So she's a very authentic leader. And let's face it, she's worked at General Motors since she was 18 years old.
Wow.
They sent her to college and sent her to graduate school, but she's been there since she was 18. So she's the real deal.
Hey there, Leadership listeners. We have something special for you. As a thank you for tuning in, we're offering you a free copy of Roger Dean Duncan's award-winning best-selling book, Change Friendly Leadership. In this book, you'll discover a proven framework for leading change that people will actually buy into, without all the stress and resistance that often stand in the way. You'll also learn powerful strategies to improve relationships both at work and at home, creating a healthier, more productive environment for everyone. To claim your free copy, just head over to changefriendly.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your good intentions into great performance. Again, grab your free copy of this best-selling book at changefriendly.com.
You write about the transformation from I to we as being the most important process leaders go through in becoming authentic.
Yeah.
What does that transformation look like in observable behaviors?
Well, Roger, we all start out as I leaders where, we have to get good grades in high school to get into college. And likewise, when we go into work, we're probably going to start out as an individual contributor. But it's making that transition. And as one person said, you have to flip the switch and realize it's all about your team. And your job is not to do everything, but you have to empower your team to step up. And it's much, Roger, like being a coach of a football team or a soccer team. You don't go on the field, but your job is to get the people in the right places on the field and then to inspire them to play their best, to challenge them. You're really much more of a coach as a leader today than you are a manager. It's not to criticize them, but to challenge them to be their best and to work with them, help them, show them how they can be better. And I think that's the we journey. But to realize, Roger, that a group of empowered team can beat the individual contributors. So I happen to follow soccer a lot. You can see there, it's not just about having a star in your team or 3 stars. Everyone has to contribute. If they play together as a team, as a compact unit, then they'll win. And the great soccer teams have had that team esprit. But as a coach, your job is you don't go on the field, but to inspire them to do that.
Yes. And you say self-awareness, in your terms, acts as an internal ballast between intensity and reflection. Can you give us an example of how self-awareness works?
Well, first of all, I wasn't very self-aware, and I've had to do a lot of discernment, meditation, get direct feedback back in college about where I was missing the boat, and always gotten feedback from people. It's extremely helpful. I consider feedback as a breakfast of champion, and that helps you gain self-awareness. And then I think that, you can then take that out and understand other people. And one of the biggest challenges we have is to see ourselves as other people see us. It's very easy to want to see how I see myself, how I want you to see me, but that isn't necessarily how we're seen. And I think having that humility to go out and learn from other people gives you that level of self-awareness that's critical to be successful in motivating people. Otherwise, people say, he just doesn't get it. He didn't understand the challenges I'm facing on my job.
Right.
But I think when people feel like you really understand them at a deeper level, you have that empathy and concern for their well-being, then they're going to want to step up and do the best job and follow your leadership.
As my grandfather said, never turn down a breath mint. Feedback is a gift.
I love it.
So
That's very good.
I
I
would
never
ask,
heard that one. I'm going to remember that one, Roger.
so why do some leaders seem to create an environment where people are reluctant to give them honest feedback? In other words, there's a lack of psychological safety. Why do they do that?
Well, that psychological safety is a big factor. My colleague at Harvard, Amy Edmondson, has written about this very well. I think people won't give them feedback because they won't hear them, or they get punished for giving feedback, and they won't hear it. I've had a couple of bosses like that, one at Litton and one at Honeywell, and they were the CEO, so you can't go beyond that. They didn't want any feedback. They want to just do it their way, and they thought they could bully people. I have a very negative aversion to bullies. I had a couple of bosses who were bullies, and I hated it. So I think they really did not, people wouldn't give them feedback. They didn't want to listen. And then people get discouraged because they don't think that anyone really understands the challenges they're facing. So that's where empathy comes back in. That's where engagement with people on the front lines. And I see far too many CEOs today sitting in their office, running numbers, looking at spreadsheets, looking at PowerPoint charts. They don't ever get out into the real world of being on the retail floor, being in a restaurant, being on the factories. I learned more going into Medtronic engineering labs and talking to frontline employees over lunch or visiting their factories than I ever did, reading papers or looking at quality statistics.
Well, for CEOs who spend their time looking at spreadsheets and PowerPoint decks, they're just guaranteeing they're going to have a lot of blind spots.
I like that term, blind spots, because that is exactly the problem. And, I have to say, I've had a lot of blind spots in the past. I was so blind, I couldn't see my blind spots. Fortunately, my spouse, Penny, who's been married for 55 years, she's very quick to point it out when I can't see my own blind spots. But I think that's a real problem. Blind spots are things that other people see in you and you can't see in yourself. Maybe you got so egotistical, you're turning people off and they see you do that, but you can't see that in yourself. And you need someone, that's when you need wise people around you that'll have the courage to confront you and say, Bill, you're really missing it here. You're so dominant here, you're not bringing out the best of our people.
Right. Now, in your most recent book, you talk about the interviews you had with more than 220 leaders. Mm-hmm. What were your criteria for selecting those leaders?
Well, I got criticized for this at Harvard because we selected people we generally thought were authentic, okay? And we wanted to have in-depth interviews. Harvard research rules, you have to publish what people say, and we want people to be really honest with us and trust me and a couple other people interviewing with me to go in-depth and tell us, what are the biggest challenges you faced? Okay, there was one person who was CEO of a major financial firm, and he was struggling with his marriage. He was losing his third marriage. And so he told us this, he allowed us to print it. He said he went to a therapist, and the therapist told him, he said to the therapist, I got a wife selection problem. I'm not choosing the right wives. And she said, why don't you come back next week and we'll talk about it. Came back next week and said, I have good news for you. You do not have a wife selection problem. You have a husband behavior problem.
Right.
But he wouldn't see that. And so that was great feedback to him, that people didn't trust him because he was just trying to lord it over or bully them into submission. And so a lot of people just don't want to look at who they are.
Bill, how can people know if their moral compass accurately points to the true north of what's actually right in a world with so many counterfeit philosophies?
Well, I think it takes a lot of discernment. I think you have to study for yourself, because maybe my moral compass points in a different direction than yours, but that's what's important to me, and that I stay on track. That's your true north, is your moral compass. And hey, Roger, we all get pulled off from time to time, but if you have a grounding in your purpose and your values, you'll come back to true north. And I think a lot of people, someone said Mark Zuckerberg's going true south, but I think they really don't know. And you really have to discern. Let's go back into my life story. Let's dig into that. What did I learn from my mother about values? She said, son, I don't care if you get A's or C's in school. Just be true to your values. And my father set big ambitions for me. What did you learn along the way from people you got to know well? And what did you finally come to solidity about who you are as a person? And I think that's your true north. Your moral compass is who you are. And yes, we do get pulled off course, but if we come back to that, we're going to be just fine. If we don't have that, then we're going to be a never, never land. And we won't know who we are or where we are. Or if we're trying to change. I saw a person I worked with who was head of McKinsey. He wound up going to jail because he lost sight of, I thought it was his moral compass, because he said he wanted to be a billionaire. And he, frankly, he cheated, traded on inside information to become a billionaire. He never became a billionaire, and he wound up going to jail. It's a real tragedy because he had great leadership potential.
Well, we saw a lot of that at Enron and at a number of other companies where smart people didn't use their smarts.
Well, let's talk about that. I think the worst thing you do is try to be the smartest person in the room.
Right.
Because you diminish everyone else around you. So you say, Roger, I'm sorry, I don't really understand. Would you help me? Everyone will help you then. And you're not trying to dominate them because you're smarter than everyone else. But
Sure.
There's a lot in our society. Oh, you got to be the smartest person around. Elon Musk is that way. He's the smartest person around, so he's not going to listen to anyone else.
Well, I worked years ago with Gordon McGovern, who was the CEO.
Yeah.
And he created a culture that made it very easy for people to speak up. If somebody several rungs down the ladder from him were to disagree with him and they felt safe in doing so,
yeah,
he would say, "Oh, that's terrific. You see it differently. Help me understand how you came to that conclusion. I think I can learn something here."
Wonderful.
And that simple statement just opened up lots of doors. And then all those smart people could actually use their smarts.
Yeah, good. Yeah, no, you really have to. He was a learner. Back to what Satya Nadella said. He was a learner. Or Doug Conan, he was, this is the way everyone should lead, though, Roger. And one of the issues we have in our society today is we have leaders who are leading different at the government level. So what I'm trying to do, and I hope through this interview, anyone that's in business or in nonprofit work or in education or media or in the military or working in government, you got to hold fast right now with all the swirling tornadoes and hurricanes going on around you. You got to hold fast to your purpose and values. If you don't do that, who are you? Okay? And if you can't, if you're the CEO of a company, you better make darn sure that everyone else in the company holds fast to their purpose and values, or you're not going to have a very good company very long.
Now, the COVID-19 pandemic caused many people to ask hard questions about their overall well-being.
Yeah.
What do you regard as the most critical questions that people, including emerging leaders, should be asking themselves?
Well, first of all, am I healthy in mind, body, and spirit? And we can get down to specifics about, do I get 8 hours sleep a night? Do I exercise every day? Do I eat healthy, drink healthy? Whatever you do. And most important of all is have the self-awareness to realize I'm under a lot of stress and I need to do things to relieve my stress. And that gives me a sense of well-being. Then I can go forward. I can work really hard. I used to have students say, I work 100 hours a week. You can't work 100 hours a week and keep your sanity. So I think people have to realize that that person working 100 hours a week is not delegating to anyone. They're just trying to do all the work themselves, and they're going to fail. So I think having that balance in your life, having a family or people around you that you really care about, that takes time. And I think nurturing those authentic relationships is critical.
Absolutely. Well, the poet Khalil Gibran wrote that work is love made visible. How can leaders imbue their behaviors with that sentiment?
First of all, that's one of my favorite things. And I think Khalil Gibran was really an inspiration to me from the time I was in my early 20s when he wrote the book, The Prophet. And a lot of wisdom in that book. It's quite spiritual. But we devote our lives to work. We spend more time at work than anything else. Shouldn't you express that your love through what you're doing? I feel like my son John is a surgeon, and he works 70 hours a week, very stressful working with stage 4 cancer patients. But he's bringing them love every day through his, not just through his surgical skills, but how he treats them before, during, and after the surgeries, and continuing with them. And that's his love made visible. And I think everyone should be doing this in the workplace. When you try to make a perfect heart valve for Medtronic so that someone can have a full life, wow, you're putting real love into that heart valve, and you would never let a defective valve get off your production line. Right. And that's the kind of, this happens at all levels. I think people, again, who work in service professions can express real love for their customers, and it makes you feel really good, and you want to come back. So whether it's a retail outlet or an airline, a restaurant, a hotel, whatever it is.
Well, clearly that philosophy can work in any industry, in any business.
Good point. Yeah, you want your banker to feel like they're expressing love. And I got a lot of financial problems. I want my banker to be there for me and help me, not get me into a mortgage I can't afford, but help me when I need help. Maybe I need a loan to get through a difficult time. Maybe I lost my job. And you have confidence I'm going to come back and get another one.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Bill. Your thoughtful insights should inspire anyone with a renewed sense of purpose and focus in approaching their leadership practices and in life in general. We so appreciate your being with us. To learn more about Bill and his work, go to billgeroge.org. That's billgeroge.org. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In other episodes of Leadership, I'm sharing my exclusive conversations with many more top thought leaders who will offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. Our guest list includes superstars like Stephen M.R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Doug Conant, Heather Younger, Marshall Goldsmith, Jessica Chen, Dana Perino, Guy Kawasaki, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.